Today, we're going to talk about something that might just change the way you see every single argument you've ever had. We're talking about emotional raw spots. Have you ever been there? You and your partner are just having a good time, maybe laughing at some dumb joke. Everything feels so easy. And then bam, out of nowhere, the whole vibe just tanks. The air gets thick, someone shuts down, or a huge fight just erupts over nothing.
If that sounds familiar, it's probably not just a bad mood. More likely, one of you just hit a raw spot. And these aren't just little pet peeves. They're more like hidden emotional landmines. When they get stepped on, it feels like a total gut punch. So we're going to break down how to spot these things so you can stop that painful cycle before it even gets going.
All right, so let's get into it. To really fix this, we've got to understand what we're dealing with. So what is a raw spot, really?
Think of it like a bad scrape that never quite healed right. It looks fine on the surface, but even the slightest touch, the gentlest brush against it, sends a jolt of intense pain through you. That's a raw spot. It's an old emotional injury, usually from our past, from a time when a really deep, fundamental need for connection just wasn't met.
And when you dig down to the heart of any raw spot, you usually find one of two really deep-seated fears. You can think of them as the two Ds. The first is feeling deprived, this nagging sense that some core emotional need is just not being fulfilled. And the second is feeling deserted, which is that terrifying, gut-wrenching feeling of being left all alone. These wounds are often formed way back, creating the blueprint for how we experience love today.
Now here's the really crucial part. When your partner accidentally pokes at one of these raw spots, your brain's alarm system, your amygdala, it doesn't see a small disagreement. No, it sees a 5-alarm fire, a direct threat to your relationship. And in that split second, your logical brain just goes offline. You stop thinking and you start reacting. It's a state called primal panic. So, if this stuff is buried so deep, how in the world are you supposed to know when a raw spot has been triggered? Well, you have to learn to read the signals. And luckily for us, there are two really clear warning signs to look out for.
First, watch for a sudden shift. It's like a switch flips. 1 second you're fine, the next, everything feels tense, defensive, and completely off-kilter, like the rules of the conversation just change without you knowing. The second big signal is a disproportionate reaction. This is when a tiny little thing, like your partner being distracted for a second, feels like a full-blown catastrophe. If you find yourself thinking, whoa, this reaction is way bigger than the situation, you can bet a raw spot is driving the bus.
Let's look at a powerful real-life example. There was a woman who would get absolutely furious whenever she was talking to her husband and his eyelids started to droop. Now, to you and me, he was just tired, right? But for her, his sleepiness was a massive trigger. See, she had a past partner who would literally pretend to fall asleep to get out of hard conversations. So her raw spot, her fear of abandonment, made her hyper-aware. Her brain wasn't seeing a tired husband. It was screaming that she was being deserted all over again.
Okay, so understanding the trigger is step one. But what do you do with that information? Well, the next step is learning how to respond differently. And that means getting to the heart of what's really going on underneath that big flashy reaction. I love this iceberg metaphor because it's so perfect. When a raw spot gets hit, we tend to show what's on the surface. These are our reactive feelings: anger, criticism, shutting down, and going numb. But all of that is just the tip of the iceberg. Hidden underneath are the much bigger, softer feelings. And that's where the real story is. That's the fear, the shame, the deep loneliness that just feels way too scary to show. The goal is to get beneath the surface. So how do we actually do that? How do you share what's underneath? A really powerful tool for this is something called handles. A handle is just a simple, short phrase that gives your partner a glimpse into your inner world, but without blaming or attacking them. It's a way to say, hey, this is what's happening inside me right now. So instead of yelling, "You never listen to me," you could try using a handle to describe that feeling underneath. You might say something like, "I just feel trapped right now," or "Honestly, my heart feels a little shattered." Even something weird like, "I feel like a slug in mud." It gives your partner a shorthand. It says, "I'm not attacking you, I'm just in a really vulnerable spot," and that almost always invites compassion instead of another fight. And that right there brings us to the whole point of this work. It's not about trying to stop having feelings. That's impossible. It's about stopping the destructive conversations that those feelings can create. It's about shifting the entire focus away from blame and toward genuine, shared understanding. And this is the reframe that changes everything. Once you can name the wound, you can finally stop seeing your partner as the bad guy.
You both can start to see that the real enemy isn't each other. It's the negative cycle you're both stuck in, and that's something you can fight together. Just recognizing your raw spots is a huge first step toward building a much stronger, safer connection. If you want to go a little deeper, we've linked to a raw spot identification worksheet down in the description. And of course, if this was helpful, we'd love for you to subscribe. It leaves us with this final thought. Once you've named the wound, what's the bravest next step you can take to actually start healing it?